PowerPoint. So we have a team of 4 folks, 3 attorneys and 1 editorial coordinator that work on superintendent searches, and we have a lot of experience. We've done at least 1 search for 84 of the state's 115 school districts, and we have completed or in the process of completing over 200 searches. We are also active members of NAS, which is a think-alike group of other state school boards associations that facilitate searches for superintendents for K-12 public school districts within their respective states. And we're always finding ways to improve our search process through our participation in that group. We also access a lot of candidates through our membership in that group. The first step in our process, as you might guess, involves deciding whether or not your board even wants to do a search. There are some boards, depending on the situation, that have an internal candidate that they know for absolute certain they're going to hire, or they know they're very, very likely going to hire. And in those situations, depending on the facts and circumstances, for pretty obvious reasons, it does not always make sense to do a search. If that's not the case with your board, you do want to do a search and you want to do it with us, next step in our process involves getting you, the board, to vote on and approve those initial search documents that I mentioned just a moment ago. The first of which is a draft timeline, which includes all, well, I should say target dates for all of the significant steps in the search process. One really important thing to keep in mind about the timeline that I've given you a copy of is the only fixed date is the application deadline, that date that's highlighted in yellow. All of the other dates are flexible. We just have, for obvious reasons, we have to set a date and time certain when applications have to be submitted by. The other dates are flexible, though we would want to stay pretty close to those in order to land on the projected announcement date at the bottom of the timeline. Next document is a vacancy announcement, which includes some general information about your school system and your community. It also explains to candidates who to reach out to and direct questions to about the search process, about the application, about the board, etc. The application, which I've provided you a draft copy of, includes mostly generic questions about work experience, education experience, superintendent licensure, things like that. There are 2 pages, or a little over 2 pages, I think it's pages 3 through 5, that have some long and short form essay questions, which we're happy to customize for your board in as much as you'd like to do that. When it comes to advertising, there are several free places that we always advertise. There are also a number of paid places that we offer to advertise. It's entirely up to your board to decide whether or not you want to spend any money on advertising, and if so, how much and where you want to spend those dollars. Our recruitment efforts are twofold. So we will, of course, recruit anyone that you, the board, either individually or collectively asks us to target for your superintendent vacancy. We also have just developed a wealth of contacts and know of lots of folks that are looking, both inside the state as well as outside of the state, that we reach out to. And that includes folks that are looking and sometimes folks that aren't looking, but we think could be a good fit for your school system. Third step in our process is entirely optional, but it's one we're happy to facilitate for you if you're interested, and it involves getting feedback from your community and staff about what sorts of things are most important to them in a new superintendent. Over my 8.5 years of doing this, we have done nearly, if not absolutely, everything under the sun in terms of getting feedback from the community and staff, and what we have found is the best way to get the most feedback in terms of number of responses, as well as the substance, good, candid feedback, is through online surveys that folks can fill out anonymously, first and foremost anonymously, and then secondly, they can fill it out privately. And we include, as part of our surveys, which I've included draft copies of, an open-ended section at the end of our surveys, where folks can, and they will, discuss at length. There's no limitations in terms of content or number of characters, where they can discuss at length issues that are really, really important to them and their family and their segment of the community that they want you, the board, to take into consideration as you move through the search process. We would set up those surveys, work with your communications folks to push those surveys out to the community and staff. We would collect, organize, and prepare all of the survey results, which I would come and present to your board at either a regular or special called meeting. I would present it to you, the board, as well as to your community and staff. We also at that stage would share with you a draft leadership profile that we would include. We basically draft a profile that includes all of the top characteristics, traits, and experience identified by your community and staff as being most important to them in a new superintendent. And then you can use that profile to inform all of the steps moving forward in the search process. Again, optional step, but one we're happy to facilitate for you if you're interested. Once the application deadline has passed, we collect, organize, prepare all of the application materials, and we share them with your board electronically via a secure online platform called Assembly that each of you would have a unique login ID and password. Somebody recognizes Assembly, I can see. Two reasons that we use Assembly. One is, and I'm certain all of you know this already, but all applicants to your school system under North Carolina personnel laws are entitled to confidentiality. We found that the best way to guard and maintain that confidentiality is through using an online platform that's secure, that only you, the board, your board attorney, or myself can access. We also use the online platform. I don't know how many of you have done a search 10-ish years ago or more, but a search involves a lot of paper. The survey results, the application materials, the due diligence materials, and we just found that the most cost-effective and efficient way of sharing all of the materials with you throughout the search process is online. Once you have had a chance to review the materials, I will come and meet with you in closed session at what is almost always a special called meeting, and I would facilitate a discussion with your board, wherein most boards at that point are ready to identify who among their applicants they'd like to have a first round, almost always a sit down in person. I strongly recommend first round interview with. One important point I want to make about this step in our search process, but really our entire search process, and it's a really important point because on this point, we differ from many other search firms, not all, but many of them, and not necessarily in a good or a bad way, but in a really significant way. And that is we in CSBA, and certainly myself, we never screen applicants. We never tell you which application to look at or not look at, who to interview or not interview, who to hire or not hire. North Carolina law makes, I think, very clear it's locally elected boards of education exclusively that hire superintendents. We do not get in the way of that. I do not get in the way of that. We get you as much information as possible and as good of information as possible, and we help you process that information in what I feel like is a really thoughtful and deliberate way. But when it comes to deciding which applications you're going to spend more time with, who you're going to interview, who you're going to offer the superintendency to, that is entirely within the province of your board. And I just want to make that abundantly clear. Once you've identified who your first round interviewees are, our team does internet and social media searches on each of them, and we also pull achievement data, test score data to the extent that is applicable and available for each of your first round interviewees, and we share that on Assembly so that you have a chance to look at it before you have that sit down interview. So if there are any questions about it, we can address it before and or during those first round interviews. We will handle all of the logistics, administrative details of setting up the first round interviews, including developing questions and customized interview notebooks for each of you. We try to make it as simple as possible for you, the board, to show up to the interviews and do the hard work of assessing the candidates. I would come in person to facilitate the interviews, get you in and out of open and closed session, keep the minutes, answer any questions that you have. I also work really hard to maintain the confidentiality and anonymity of each of the first round interviewees. And then at the end of those interviews, vast majority of boards at that point are ready to identify finalists. 2, 3, sometimes as many as 4 finalists that they'd like to have the second round interview with. If you're ready to do that at that step, we have a very thorough due diligence check that we perform on each of those finalists, which includes reference checking, a criminal credit degree verification check, salary, very detailed salary information that we get self-reported from the candidate as well as from a copy of their contract. And we get, in as much as they're available, evaluations going back at least 5 years. We also, in addition to updating the internet and social media searches, offer to do a wide range of other due diligence checking depending on what your board is looking for and how that first round interview went and what sort of information maybe additional you're looking for. We also, in doing this, ensure that all of the checks comply with the FCRA, the Fair Credit Reporting Act. If you don't know, and again, without going into too much detail, that is a federal law that applies to any government entity that contracts with a third party like NCSBA to perform any kind of character and fitness checking on applicants. And it's really, really important to comply with the FCRA because not doing so can subject your board to really, really significant liability. And we have a great process for making sure that you get all the information you need, which is really important, and do really thorough due diligence checking, but in a fair way that is, of course, legally compliant. We would handle all of the logistics of setting up the second round interviews just like we did with the first round interviews. I would come in person to facilitate those second and what are usually final round interviews. At the end of those interviews, as I just said, vast majority of boards at that point are ready to begin negotiating with one of the finalists to select who they'd like to begin making an offer to and negotiating a contract with. If you're not ready at that point, sometimes we do in isolated circumstances, a little bit of additional due diligence, or we have another round of interviews. But assuming you are ready, either at that point or a later date to begin negotiating a contract, we would hand the baton off to your board attorney, who would advise you on what to offer and negotiate. And generally at that point, the vast majority of candidates also hire an attorney to negotiate the contract. The last step in our process involves drafting a press release that we would work with your board and the candidate to finalize before sharing with your communication folks at an appropriate time, ensuring confidentiality. And then, of course, we would finalize all of the minutes that we've been recording at the various closed session special call meetings we've been having with your board throughout the search process. I will not spend a lot of time on these. We have a lot of experience and expertise, and we can hold ourselves to a really high standard. This slide shows the searches we've recently completed, the one we're currently working on. Our expertise is twofold, I think. We have a lot of expertise in the administrative HR aspects of doing a search, of which there are many. We also have a lot of experience in the dealing with the legal issues that sometimes come up during a superintendent search. So we can make sure that you not only have an administratively smooth search, but a legally compliant search, which is equally important. And of course, we hold ourselves to a really high standard. The most important decision you make as a board, and I'm sure you've heard this before, is who your superintendent is going to be. And you deserve nothing short of an excellent process, and we would of course strive to provide you with that if you were to hire us. That